Herbert Spencer's grave faces Marx's at Highgate Cemetery in London. At his memorial, Spencer was honored for his anti-imperialism by Indian national liberation advocate and anti-colonialist Shyamji Krishnavarma, who funded a lectureship at Oxford in Spencer's name. What would the 19th century liberal, utilitarian, and social Darwinist Herbert Spencer, 1820 to 1903, who was perhaps the most prominent, widely read, and popular philosopher in the world during his lifetime, that is, in Marx's lifetime, have to say to Marxists, or more generally to the left, when such liberalism earned not only Marx's own scorn, but also Nietzsche's criticism? Nietzsche referred to Spencer and his broad appeal as the modern enigma of the English psychologists. Nietzsche critiqued what he took to be Spencer's assumption of a historically linear evolutionary development and improvement of human morality, leading to a 19th century epitome, where Nietzsche found the successive transvaluation of values through profound reversals of self-overcoming. Nietzsche regarded modern liberal morality not as a perfection, but rather as a challenge and task to achieve an overman that, failing, threatened to result in a nihilistic dead end of the last man instead. Marx regarded Spencerian liberalism as an example of the decrepitude of bourgeois revolutionary thought in decadence. Marx's son-in-law, the French socialist Paul Lafargue, wrote, just after Marx's death, against Spencer's bourgeois pessimism, to which he offered a Marxist optimism. Such Marxism fulfilled Nietzsche's pessimism of the strong. By the late 19th century, Marxists could be confident about transcending bourgeois society. Not so today. Spencer's distinction of militant versus industrial society, that is to say, the distinction of traditional civilization versus bourgeois society, is still, unfortunately, quite pertinent today and illuminates a key current blind spot on the ostensible left, especially regarding the phenomenon of war. Spencer followed the earlier classical liberal Benjamin Constant's observation that moderns get through commerce what the ancients got through war, and that for moderns, war is always regrettable, and indeed largely unjustifiably criminal, whereas for ancients, war was virtuous, among the very highest virtues. Do we moderns sacrifice ourselves for the preservation and glory of our specific culture, as militants do, or rather dedicate ourselves to social activity that facilitates universal freedom, a value unknown to the ancients? Does the future belong to the constant warfare of particular cultural differences, or to human society? Marx thought the latter. The question is whether we think that we will fight, or rather exchange and produce our way to freedom. Is freedom to be achieved through militant, or rather industrial, society? Marx assumed the latter. When we seek to extol our political leaders today, we do not depict them driving a tank, but waking at 5 o'clock and staying up past midnight to do society's business. We do not speak of their scars earned in combat, but rather their gray hairs accumulated in office, not enjoying the spoils of war on a dais, but getting in their daily morning jog to remain fit for work. We judge them not as cunning warriors, but as diligent workers, and responsible negotiators. In our society, it is not the matter of a battle to win, but a job to do. Carl Schmitt thought that this has led to our dehumanization, but few would agree. What would have appeared commonplace to Spencer's contemporary critics, such as Nietzsche and Marx, must strike us today, rather, as profoundly insightful and indeed critical of our society. This is due to the historical regression of politics and society since Marx's time, and moreover, to the liquidation of Marxism. What Marx would have regarded as fatally one-sided and undialectical in Spencer would today seem adequate to the prevailing condition, in the absence of the Marxist-Hegelian dialectic. The Marxist critique of liberalism has been rendered moot, not in the sense of liberalism's actual social supersession, but by historical regression. Society has fallen below the historical threshold of not only socialism, but of classical liberalism, of bourgeois emancipation itself. Not only have we fallen below the criteria of Kant and Hegel that surpassed 18th century empiricism, we have fallen below its 19th century successor, positivism, as well. The question is the status today of liberalism as ideology. It is utopian. As Adorno put it, it is both promise and sham. Militant and industrial tendencies confront each other today, not as different societies, but as opposed aspects of the same society, however contradictorily and antagonistically in capitalism. Similarly, the phases of religious, metaphysical, and positive forms do not succeed one another sequentially in a linear development, but rather interact in a dynamic of social history. What Spencer regarded as regressive metaphysics remains valid in capitalism, as ideology calling for dialectical critique. We cannot now claim to address problems in the clear air of enlightenment. If Adorno, for instance, critiqued sociological positivism, this was not as a romantic anti-positivist such as Max Weber, but rather as a critique of positive sociology as ideology in capitalism. For Adorno, positivism and Heideggerian ontology, as well as Weberian cultural sociology, opposed each other in an antinomy of capitalism that would be overcome not in one principle triumphing over another, but rather in the antinomy itself being succeeded dialectically in freedom. Weber denied freedom, whereas Spencer assumed it. Both avoided the specific problem of capitalism. To take a condition of unfreedom for freedom is the most salient phenomenon of ideology. This is what falsified positivism as liberal enlightenment, its false sense of freedom as already achieved, that still actually tasked society. Freedom is not to be taken as an achieved state, but a goal of struggle. An emancipated society would be positivist, enlightened and liberal, in ways that under capitalism can only be ideologically false and misleading. Positivism should therefore be understood as a desirable goal beyond rather than a possibility under capitalism. The problem with Herbert Spencer is that he took capitalism, grasped partially and inadequately as bourgeois emancipation, to be a condition of freedom that would need yet to be really achieved. If metaphysics contra positivism remains valid in capitalism, then this is as a condition to be overcome. Capitalist metaphysics is a real symptom of unfreedom. Positivism treats this as merely an issue of mistaken thinking, or to be worked out through scientific methodology, whereas it is actually a problem of society requiring political struggle. The antinomy of positivism versus metaphysics is not partisan but social. As Adorno observed, the same individual could and would be scientifically positivist and philosophically ontological existentialist. Spencer's opposition to socialism in the 19th century was in its undeniable retrograde illiberal aspect what Marx called reactionary socialism. But Marx offered a perspective on potentially transcending socialism's one-sidedness in capitalism. Spencer was entirely unaware of this Marxian dialectic. Marx agreed with Spencer on the conservative reactionary and regressive character of socialism. Marx offered a dialectic of socialism and liberalism presented by their symptomatic and diagnostic antinomy in capitalism that pointed beyond itself. 18th century liberalism's insufficiency to the 19th century problem of capitalism necessitated socialist opposition, but liberalism still offered a critique of socialism that would need to be fulfilled to be transcended, and not dismissed, let alone defeated, as such. Only in overcoming capitalism through socialism could, as Marx put it, humanity face its condition with sober senses. This side of emancipation from capital, humanity remains trapped in a phantasmagoria of bourgeois social relations become self-contradictory and self-destructive in capital. This phantasmagoria was both collective and individual, socialist and liberal in character. Spencer naturalized this antinomy. His libertarian anti-statism and its broad popular political appeal down through the 20th century was the necessary result of the continuation of capitalism and its discontents. Spencer regarded the problem as a historical holdover of traditional civilization to be left behind, rather than as the new condition of bourgeois society in capitalist crisis that Marx recognized needed to be, but could not be, overcome in Spencer's liberal terms. Marx agreed with Spencer on the goal, but differed, crucially, over the nature of the obstacle and hence how to get there from here. Not only Spencer's later followers, more egregiously than Spencer himself, but Marx's own, have falsified this task. It has been neglected and abandoned. We cannot assume, as Marx did, that we are already past Spencer's classical liberalism, but are driven back to it ineluctably, whether we realize it or not. Only by returning to the assumptions of classical liberalism can we understand Marx's critique of it. The glare of Marx's tomb at Highgate stares down upon a very determinate object. If one disappears, they both do.